Good afternoon. I am Karega Rausch, NACS's new president and CEO. Let me tell you why I'm here today. You see, I've had experiences where I have witnessed firsthand the importance of charter school authorizing and the need to do better by kids. Some of you may know that I was an authorizer at the Indianapolis Mayor's office. I've spent a lot of time working with school districts with too many kids of color in special education and too many kids of color and kids with disabilities being removed from school via suspension and expulsion. I've also served on the leadership team at Indiana University's Equity Project, and most recently, I've led NACS's research initiatives and worked to create a strong evidence base for quality authorizing. These experiences have left me with many questions, but this I am clear about. There are questions we need to answer together in order to evolve. Think about this. How do we truly center our work in the hopes and needs of communities, while not patronizing them as if they're not capable of doing so much more than what we've already collectively achieved? Here's another question. How do we think more broadly about what a good school is and honor different ways in which schools can demonstrate excellence, while not throwing away important methods that we use to identify and address opportunity and achievement gaps? And finally, how do we do this work in a principled fashion, never compromising our values, while not alienating people of goodwill who think differently than we do? Authorizing needs to evolve. The key to our future lies in answering these and other critical questions together. And that's why I'm so glad we are here today. During the next 3 weeks, please join me in reflecting, evolving, and innovating as we gather virtually to radically imagine what the next 20 years of charter school authorizing can do for students. My ancestors radically imagined a future that didn't exist. It's not lost on me that I am the first Black CEO of this organization. And that is both an enormous opportunity and responsibility. I think about those who have come before me, like my grandfather, who became a great mechanic, but there were few other opportunities available to him as a Black man. Today, I honor the people who worked, told, and died in order for me to have this opportunity. I hope I make them proud. And so, my commitment to you as NACS's next new leader is to ensure that when we talk about all kids, we are truly talking about all kids. One thing the past few months has laid bare between the pandemic and racial injustice is that it isn't always happening as it should. So I come before you today to unequivocally say that we must not return to the status quo. We must find new ways to educate students that meet every child's unique needs and to raise the bar for what is possible within our public education system for all students. During the next 3 weeks, I invite you to consider how our profession can innovate to uphold quality and equity. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I do know that if we're going to build an education system that truly works for all students, it must involve listening to a variety of people with different experiences and perspectives. It means pushing ourselves to think in new ways that challenge how we currently see the world. And it involves the intersectionality between education and justice. Education and justice. That is exactly why we've asked 8 Black hands to lead us into our conference. This group of freedom fighters shows up to fight for the students and families who have waited too long for justice that has been delayed and denied. Now, before 8 Black Hands takes us forward, a few housekeeping items. First, please spend some time with our conference platform, Crowd Compass. It's a great way to virtually network with colleagues through a chat function. You can also set up meetings with other attendees, bookmark your schedule, and learn about our conference sponsors. All session materials will be available after the live sessions in our online learning system, Authorize. Finally, today's opening session looks a little different than a traditional Zoom meeting. It's a Zoom webinar, a format that we will use in some other sessions as well. The big difference is that you can only see the faces of the speakers, not the faces of the participants. Now, there is a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen, and we encourage you to use that when you want to ask the panelists a question. So, I warmly welcome you, the nearly 950 participants and growing in this first ever virtual NACSA Leadership Conference, in a year of first evers for all of us. And now it is my distinct honor to welcome 8 Black Hands to our 2020 conference. NACSA National Advisory Board member, Sharif El-Mekki, and Chris Stewart, Charles Cole, and Ray Ankrum. Gentlemen, it's all yours.
All right. So thank you for that welcome, man. That was huge. Tons of energy. I felt the passion from the intro statement. Guys, how did you feel about the intro statement?
Hey, first of all, I want to say congratulations again to Dr. Rausch for his new role in leading NACSA. And yeah, and I think this idea of what justice looks like, particularly in this space, and has been denied, delayed permanently from their vantage point, and denied wholeheartedly. And, you know, that's what is worthy of all of our energy. So yeah, I thought it was the right context and the right framing.
Yeah, Breezy, what'd you think?
I'm touched, man. Like, I mean, listen, that opening was amazing. When he gets to the part about his ancestors, and you can feel that it's real. And this is not what you get from new leaders coming into places. This is not the way you open a thing. People are always so staid and settled and blah, blah, blah. But when he said the word ancestors, it came out of him. It just actually, the passion was there to pour. We were being visited by some people of the past in that moment. And that is something for us to keep remembering every day when we talk about these 8 million Black children walking into schools that aren't ready for them, is the fact that they are carrying with them in their backpacks and in their souls and in their skin and in their melanin, they are carrying with them larger groups of people that came before them with hopes and aims and dreams. So anybody running a school, starting a school, operating a school, thinking about this, stop just thinking in terms of budgets and staffing and pedagogy and whatnot, and also think about the hopes and the dreams that these kids carry with them into schools, like we just saw on display just now. I'm touched. That's what it is. Don't get me preaching.
I should have went before Chris because I don't want to follow.
Absolutely. That, hey, from now on out, I've learned. He's gonna go last. He has to go last.
No, bro.
Good, man. And Mr. Karega, I look forward to getting to know you better. And I think that I think that him leading this is such a big thing. And like you said, it's both something to celebrate and to be sad about at the same time. And I totally feel that. And I think that it's indicative of the fight that we have to continue to have right now. And I'm expecting after this talk, like we're gonna have a whole army of folks that's gonna help us make sure that our kids get the things that they need. So we would love for you all to become inaugural and part of the 8 Black Hands family. So
yeah, so plug them in. Where do they find us, Charles?
Yeah, so you can go on Twitter and we are at 8 Black Hands 1. It was, I know they said in the beginning, but it was flipped. Twitter is at 8 Black Hands 1, and on Facebook you can just search for at 8 Black Hands. And I know that you all's hashtag is radically imagine. Also consider adding another hashtag 8BH, so we can find your comments and your questions. Let me tell you a secret. If you put them in your phone now and you copy it, then you can just do your Twitters and your Facebook messages, and you can just copy it in, and it'll save you a bunch of time. So tag us at hashtag 8BH.
That's what's up, Charles. Thank you for that, Dr. Cole. All right, so fellas, when I think about radically reimagining schools, I think about those action movies where, you know, I think I saw a Denzel movie the other day where he set a timer and then he just walked away, and he had walked enough space to where it blew up without him having to run from the blow up. Like, I want to blow all this stuff up because I don't think that it works for the 8 million black kids, and it definitely doesn't work for the 10 million brown kids. So in terms of blowing this thing up, man, what do we need to do? Like, what is that going to look like? Charles, we'll start with you.
I mean, I think that one of the first things they take away from you, especially when you're a slave, is your ability to dream. Like, if you can't dream beyond where you currently are, you just continue to do the same things over and over. So if we're going to radically reimagine education, you know, what does it look like if schools had Nobel Prize winning, like, that's who was leading math was Nobel Prize winner mathematicians. What does it look like to actually have the best in the business to make sure that our academic curriculum is going where it needs to go and is future-proof, right? So what I would be looking at and what I like to see is, I like to see a reimagined education system that is, if you want to be a young CEO, you can say that in the 5th grade, and there's a track for you where you can get that type of exposure. That's teaching you how to take care of a family again, how to take care of a home, how to, you know, I thought I knew a whole bunch of stuff until I bought my house, y'all. And then something broke, you know what I mean? And it was just like, oh, my uncle, you know, my cousin who actually didn't go to college, but he know how to fix everything. And he was a firefighter, came over, and he was way more valuable to me at that time, right? It's a nuanced look at what education and what success is. So I think it starts by us just allowing ourselves to daydream for a moment around what things could look like if we actually start to reimagine. So that would be step one.
All right, so Breezy, let me set you up. So when we talk about bad education, like, most people think, all right, the poor and disenfranchised are the ones that are just not educated, but that's untrue. Like, suburban kids are not getting what they need as well. Talk to us about that, sir.
I mean, it's not just suburban, like, parents in general are not waking up every single day thinking about the things that you all as school leaders think about. They're not waking up every day thinking about scope and sequence and budget and staffing and all that type of stuff. They're thinking about how they make life happen for themselves and for their kids. And one of the ways that they're thinking about, like, their kids' education is a little bit on autopilot until there's a problem. So your kid has, like, dyslexia or is falling behind and you don't know why. And that happens everywhere. That happens in the suburbs. That happens, I live in a more rural area. That happens where I'm at. And that to me is the call out for, we have to expand the tent of what we call equity. Usually when we think about equity, we always think it means, it's always color coded and economic coded. It doesn't involve a broader tent of people that are looking for educational opportunities for their kids. And COVID is making that more visible than ever before, because everybody's kind of struggling. You got middle class people, working class people, underclass people, everybody kind of racing to figure out what they can do for their kids every day, which makes it a good time to think through this question around how do we radically reimagine education? Because before COVID, you would have had a lot of reasons to say, well, why should we? Or we don't have to, or it's working okay, blah, blah, blah. Now with COVID, it's kind of like, COVID is like the ghost in the machine that basically said, no, you're going to do it now. You're going to do it now. You really going to have to rethink everything. And I think this is the opportunity for school leaders, people running schools, designing schools, thinking about schools, to question everything that they do for any constituency, whether you are a white family, black family, college educated, not. How do you rethink how you use scope and sequence, budgets, staffing, time, seat time, the connection, the home family connection? How are you innovating on all those things? Because right now, COVID is making, I know my school district is having to scramble to rethink everything real quickly, and they're failing because they don't have the innovation gene in them. They're failing to figure out how they reimagine quickly. I think the most radical way to reimagine right now is just to do it well, period, as you rethink. Because there's a lot of rethinking going on right now. Most of it's not good. But that's what I would say is like, see more people. See the family in the suburbs that has a problem with the daughter with dyslexia. See the family that has a brilliant, going to be the next Obama in their school system that we're passing over in, like where Charles is at, is in Oakland or in Chicago or in DC, right? See more families and imagine what you can do for them differently.
Reef, jump in there, Chief.
Yeah, man. I mean, just to double down on what Chris and Cole said, like I think reimagining would have to do the opposite of what was done before. So if you center our children, uh, and start from there, like that's not, almost like that target that everybody's going
Mm-hmm.
doing the axe throwing in the bars now, that bullseye, right? Like start with there and putting children and then building out. Right now, when people do it, what's in the bullseye? Politics, adults,
Mm.
even budgets, right? It's like, okay, we have this much money. Not, oh, this is what kids need and we're starting there. It's like, this is how much money we have. And then let's start parceling out and like, this isn't good enough, but it's good enough for them. And so then that just continues this trend. So what's revolutionary, what doesn't happen often, particularly for the type of schools that we're talking about, they are, children are not centered. And so if we started with that, I think that's where we would have built-in accountability, because they will be centered and we're like, okay, how do we make sure that their needs, their community's aspirations, their goals, how do we make sure that those are realized? And I think that's the step that we could be using right now, because as Chris said, this pandemic has caused people to start rethinking, even if some of their thinking is still really constricted. But it's a window of opportunity, and hopefully more schools, more school leaders, more district leaders, and those adjacent to it will do something radically differently.
Yeah, bro. To double down on all y'all's points, because you guys definitely made some really good points. I'm just thinking about, just as a school leader, how important it was to invest in your infrastructure. And so for those people that used their imagination prior to COVID happening, and for those people that were creating those Wakanda type environments for kids prior to COVID, those are the people that are experiencing a whole lot of success right now. For those people that are just willing to just buck the system and not really care about anything except kids and kids learning, those are the schools that are flourishing right now. And so we gotta, we gotta look at that exactly like you guys said, in terms of like just putting kids first and making kids, number one in the options. Because right now, kids, when you talk about education, kids come up like 8th, 9th, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they should be
Mm-hmm.
number
Mm-hmm.
one.
Mm-hmm.
As paramount to put kids first. So I don't necessarily agree with how schools are chartered. The process seems to only work for certain kinds of schools and certain kids in certain schools and certain kinds of school leaders. So how do we change this narrative? And how do we afford unconventional ways for people to get what they want out of these schools? Breezy, we'll start with you.
I don't know why you're gonna start with me on that question.
The reason why I'm starting with you is the reason why I'm starting with you.
Yeah,
is because you made a lot of waves about this Afrocentric school that was in Harlem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I want you to talk about like those kinds of schools and why they could work.
Well, this is what I want to say, like talking to you from Minnesota, to the birthplace of charter schools, where I think we still have a very different charter school economy than there are in other places. Like, when charter schools get to California and they get to New York, which y'all do on the coasts, is different than what we do here in the motherland, the charter school motherland. So in the charter school motherland of Minnesota, we don't have a lot of chains. Matter of fact, when I say not a lot, that's not even a good way of putting it. We don't have any chains, really. We have mom and pop shop charter schools as a rule almost. Our authorizers, we went from 22 authorizers down to 11, and that was seen as a big deal, but 11 is still more than most people have. Like, where you have 1 or 2 or 3 authorizers. In that, we have a lot of like community members. If you want to start a school, for instance, for the Somali community, you want to start a school that serves like the Hmong community or whatnot, you come up with a plan, you find an authorizer, you have a school. So we have Hmong Academy, we have schools that serve the Somali families that have that as an interest, boys, girls, whatever. So we have this variety, this ecosystem of variety. Now, not everybody is happy with when they put quality constraints on what we're doing, not happy with it. But when you say something like the way that we charter schools has to change or whatnot, I think that begs for like examples of like how it's different in Florida and New York, for instance, versus Minnesota, versus like there's like 40 something charter laws across the country. And I don't know which ones y'all would consider best or worst. I really love the idea that the way we do it here in Minnesota offers communities the opportunity to start their own schools. and schools grow out of the community often because of that. So I don't know if that's the answer that you were looking for, but because we have that ecosystem, we do have an Afrocentric school. We've got a couple Afrocentric schools. We have some that serve specifically Latino interests and concerns. Just different communities that wanted their own schools because they're not being served by the main district.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Charles, so you guys got some things happening over in Oakland. Talk to us about A to G, and then some of the culturally specific schools that are flourishing in Oakland.
Yeah, well, there's a few. So one, A through G, just for the folks that don't know, that is what we use in California to determine if you are able to go to college or not. Basically, it's like the basic barrier that you need to pass. So there's graduation, but then there's also, are you A through G qualified? Meaning, did you take 4 years of English, 3 years of math? Every state has something, but it might be called something different. But the issue is in places like Oakland, where we have really increased Black graduation, and some schools are 80%, 85%. When you actually look at those numbers and dig deeper, only 30% of those kids are actually eligible to go to college. And in California, which is one of the largest public university systems, if you have a 3.0 and A through G eligible, you're promised a spot in our university system. So for instance, in West Oakland, there's a Black high school for the most part, and they won the last 3 out of 4 state football championships. And the majority of those kids on that football team had to go to a junior college as opposed to getting D1 scholarships, right? And nobody's talking about it, right? But here's the thing that's interesting. And here's why you need to fight as a charter person, right? Most of our charter kids didn't know about A through G. You know why? Because most of them already had it taken care of. So they just had A through G requirements aligned and executed along with graduation rates. And so don't kind of fall like to these false narratives. And that's something that gets done really, really well in the charter high schools in Oakland. But when you ask about like, specific type of cultures and schools or whatnot, actually those schools do well both on the traditional and the charter side. So there's a school, Lincoln Elementary School, which is in the middle of Chinatown. It's a traditional school. For the most part, they got all Chinese teachers, and they stay kind of isolated from the rest of the district, even though they're part of the district. And their reading levels and how they perform is amazing. And then there's also a charter school called Yu Ming, that's dual immersion, that's teaching kids how to, speak another language, and it's also doing really well. And so what I take from that is when you have culturally affirming settings, not necessarily segregated settings, but culturally affirming settings, right? You actually can do great things, and charter spaces allow you the freedom to be able to create and build those things. But here, like, nobody knows how Lincoln is doing what they're doing, like, because they are a part of a system and they've just been that way for a while. Right now, charter schools are the apparatus in which educators can be creative, and it's still free for the community. You don't have to have all the things that a private school has. And so, charter schools should be places that's super effective and efficient at educating kids, but also the labs by which other schools can take a model after. So, again, we got to start radically reimagining what's possible, right? Because when the original dream of charter schools came about, it was supposed to be that lab, right? But things are so bad that they became a refuge for so many people. And now we're just, so it's great that a lot of our charter schools are performing well and some are not. But I also want to see us taking some more risk and like actually elevating and pushing education to the next place that it needs to be. I'm pushing myself to radically imagine what education could be. So thanks for that question, Ray.
Yeah, no problem. Reef, jump in there, boss.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were both talking about this idea of innovation and, like why it's so important, right? And some people think like, innovation means just being creative for creativity's sake. But if students are centered, then all the innovation is to make sure that their goals are realized, right? And so whether it's the culturally affirming spaces, this idea of being able to pivot. There was some article in, I think in Philadelphia or, maybe beyond, but it was talking about at the start of the pandemic that there were charters were able to move faster. They were able to pivot and be nimble, right? Faster than what a Titanic might be, right? Like that iceberg. That was people saw it and were like, okay, we can tweak this and tweak that. That's what they should be doing all the time, because the endemic of racist outcomes for students means that they should always be trying to pivot and innovate, but still tied back into what the students' needs are. Right. And so we shouldn't have to wait to this disaster, this worldwide global disaster, to now say like, oh, we need to do things differently. That is the role of these. If you have the honor and the privilege to authorize a charter, to lead a charter, like use that responsibility, that weighty responsibility, to make sure that you are always, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the noise is. If you're producing student outcomes, that is the purest form of, educational activism. That is what justice looks like. And so we should always be in this responsive and proactive mode simultaneously.
There's a tension here, though, that I just want to say. There's a tension between always focusing on the outcomes, which we should do. What are the outcomes? But also being creative and innovative enough to do some things sometimes that are messy that get you to the next level. Like innovation is not always clean, right? Like it requires. What I would say to authorizers, though, is because this is the tension between a place like Minnesota and California and Florida and New York. The tension between how you authorize schools, between those where Minnesota falls more on the creative side, some of those other places fall more on the bean counting side, like the side.
Wait,
where,
bro,
like,
knock it off.
No, I'm not gonna knock it off. I'm gonna knock it out the park, bro.
How many? First of all, right? What's the percentage of teachers in Minnesota that are Black? Let's start there.
Well, first of all, I don't know what that has to do with my point.
I'm gonna bring it around. I'm gonna make it work.
I'll say this much. The percentage of them that are Black are way more in charter schools than there are in the traditional public school systems. So way more. Like if you are running a charter school, chances are you've got more Black students and Black teachers.
Why is that?
Well, not even just Black, as a matter of fact, because like I said, you have things like the academies for Hmong students and whatever. And I think part of it is those are the communities that had felt like they needed a solution. They were part of the impetus for charter schools in the first place. They were the ones who were saying your mainline system is including American Indian students who are like, your colonist systems have never done well and aren't going to do well for us, and we're going to start schools. And they kind of were like one of the leaders of starting their own educational programs in schools, and other communities followed suit, because it is a very white state with a lot of Black and Brown and Native American students who started creating their own solutions. But along the way, you could have closed down any of their schools along the way because they didn't have the right proficiency yet, or they didn't have the right outcome. And what they would have said to you is, we've been in your schools for 100 years. You think that like 10 years in a school that we start is going to turn everything around? We need the space to design our own solutions. We need the space, the resources, and the opportunity. And no, don't come and try and close our Hmong school because the authorizer said, we thought that you would have 100% proficiency in 5 years or something like that, when the mainline district schools still have like a 5% proficiency, or something like that amongst your own students. So that to me is just the tension between the cult of proficiency versus the cult of creativity in charter world. They have to have some common ground, some middle ground if equity is ever going to take place.
Definitely. Thanks for adding that context. All right, so I'm in.
Oh, and by the way, it's 5%, 5 or 6% in the entire state. 96% of teachers in Minnesota are white.
Yeah. That's a different podcast. All right. So in the great state of New York, we have 3 authorizers. We got the Board of Regents, we got SUNY, and then we got the New York State Board of Ed, which is allowed to kind of authorize their own charter schools in the city. There's a cap on charter schools, so we're trying to go through legislation in order to remove that cap to give parents more choice. But the reason why I mention that is because I want to plug the Board of Regents, which is my authorizer for the Riverhead Charter School. I feel like they allow us the flexibility to be able to do what we need to do in order to make sure our kids are learning. When they come in with a microscope, but it's like a microscope that also entails like conversation. So like if things are not going well, we're able to like tell them, hey, listen, things aren't really going well in this area, but here are our plans in order to get them to the next level, or here are the things that we're trying to do in order to move our kids and move the needle forward. And I feel like by having those types of conversations with your authorizers and being able to be transparent and trust your authorizers to not come in the next day to try to close your school down because you were transparent with them is extremely important. So that relationship between your authorizers and the authorizers in the school is extremely important. So if you guys are authorizers listening to this, make sure that you're building more than superficial relationships with the folks that run these schools. They need your input and they need your help, and they need to be able to come to you in an honest fashion without feeling like they're gonna close down the next day because they were honest. All right, so next question, folks, and Charles, we'll start with you. No, actually, we started with you last time, so Reef, we'll start with you. What needs to happen in your radically imagined vision for your radically imagined vision to come to fruition?
I mean, I think one of the things that that we could take a look at is who has the power, like who's controlling, who opens schools, who's founding schools, who's leading schools, right? Because if you're, we all talked about these culturally affirming communities. Are the people founding them, are they grounded in that? Then it's going to be much easier for that to flourish within the school. If somebody has to read a book, join a circle, take a workshop or two to even start trying to decipher that, to start, ingesting it, it's going to be much harder for them to bring that to fruition. And so I think, one, the deliberate diversification of the decision makers, the founders, the leaders, that's one of the most important levers to happen now, so that 5 years from now we have these culturally affirming locations and schools. And so I think a lot of times people are doing things outside of that, and you still have some of the same white people leading something, and throwing a workshop here or there, throwing pennies at a problem, instead of really saying, like, what's the real issue about race, class, and privilege? And why is this undermining, student learning and teacher effectiveness? A lot of times people don't want to have those conversations, but that is, I think, from my vantage point, one of the most important levers to radically changing this is the people that are at the decision-making space, both within the school as well as adjacent to school, inside the entire educational ecosystem. Their mindsets have to be right about the kids and the communities that send these children to us.
Man, I feel like we're on Freedom Fridays right now. Breezy, we're coming right to you, bro. What are your thoughts?
You coming to me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Freedom Fridays. You know, me and Charles aren't on Freedom Fridays unless somebody is absent.
Bro, you are welcome to come anytime you want and be on Freedom Fridays for one. Friday, yeah.
Don't be grimy on this show. We guess. Don't be acting grimy on here.
Right. And then the reason you feel like it's Freedom Friday is because Sharif is in the bunker. Like, if you just look at the picture there, he's in the bunker, right? So like that's why it feels like Freedom Friday to y'all. Listen, man, for first of all, how do we reimagine school? And I think the thing always to do in situations like this is to be precise with language and to make sure that the right question is at the center of what you're doing. I don't think we should reimagine school. I think we should reimagine learning. To me, that's more precise for me. What do you put at the center? Do you put a school? Do you put a teacher? Do you put the parent? Do you put the child? Do you put the student? I put learning at the center of it. And then I unbundle that from everything that was close, everything that had it captured, the buildings, the walls, the school day, the bells, the whistles, the tests, the assessments, all of that. We start to act like all those things are an end. Those things are a means to an end and not a really good one. So if you want to talk about radical and reimagining, I'd say throw all those things out. Start from scratch. Tabula rasa, and figure out what the sine qua non is. Sine qua non is the thing of which nothing else can exist, and that's student learning. So if we were going to do student learning today and we were going to reimagine it, let's not reimagine. I hate the word re. I don't want to redo anything. I don't want to reform nothing. I don't want to rethink. I don't want to reimagine, because you don't reimagine crap, do you? How do we reimagine crap? No. You say, how do we not have crap? Right? So from the get-go, so let's tabula rasa this thing, right? And start from scratch. How do you do student learning? If I were to ask you that question, you wouldn't do budgeting or funding or anything that we do right now the way that we do it right now, I can almost guarantee. So that to me is number one. What would it take to radically reimagine things? And number one, get rid of the word re out of the imagine, for one. Number
But to
two,
be fair to them, they don't have re in theirs. Theirs just radically imagine.
no, I'm not saying that they do.
Oh,
I'm
no,
not putting this
I
on
was
the
giving
host.
them props. I was giving them props.
Listen, man, I'm not beating up the host here. I'm not beating up our host. I'm just saying in general, we do this a lot. Rethinking schools, reimagine this, reform, whatever. No, we don't. We just need to form, not reform, because like, the form we had before was crap. It was just a big turd blossom. So anyways, like, listen, this is what I think. I think that if you really want to put learning at the center of things and start from scratch, that's what it takes for me. But in that process, parents have to lead from the front. So you need a different relationship to parents. You can't be trying to educate kids in spite of parents. You have to be educating them with. So I would ask any authorizer, you authorize a school, what was the meaningful and thoughtful process of parents in that process of you authorizing that particular school or declining that particular school? What were the community voices that told you that they didn't need that school that you declined, or they did need the school that you approved or whatnot? And was it meaningful, right? Meaningful, a thoughtful process and engagement so that they have some buy-in or whatnot. And everything that comes after that has to be about students and learning. I think right now we're driven by all the wrong Pavlovian whistles. What are the chances that this is going to be like a school that has 90% proficiency in the first year and keeps that same proficiency level for 10 years? Man, come on, stop it. Stop it. Parents didn't tell you to decline that school. Why are you smiling, Ray? Why are you smiling?
Because I want you to get some context to the listeners. You said tabula rasa.
Tabula
what does
rasa.
That mean? What tabula? What is that?
I think it's the stuff you get at the vegan deli that makes you feel good. Tabula rasa. Yeah, I'll have some tabula rasa on the side of my wrap. Tabula rasa. Can I get some tabula rasa with that?
Take that with the
right. I don't even know why I even. Hey, Charles. Sorry.
Yeah, man. So one, let's imagine it, right? Because the way that school looks the same now as it did when people were getting around by horses. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same structure. And here's the thing. What if a city looked at the needs that it had as a city and as a state, right? And what if that city became almost like a giant college campus, right? And just think of it, because I played basketball. So I don't need to be relegated to one school building ever again, because we just saw people doing distance learning. I did I have a doctorate degree, and some of that stuff was online. I got to study somewhere else and do whatnot. So maybe I want to go to the school in my neighborhood, right? But I also want to go and learn about agriculture at the school that's down the street in a different part of town on Tuesdays, right? And maybe on Fridays, I'm at the math school, the math specialist school or whatnot. In Oakland, we were trying to reimagine. We have amazing athletes in Oakland, right? To be so small, it produces a ton of professional athletes. So what we were trying to do is we were trying to imagine a school that was a sports complex where you didn't just reward players and athletes, but you also taught them the business of it. So if I would have known that I could be a sports agent, if I would have known there was 100,000 jobs surrounded around the game of basketball, right? And I could have been able to do those things, I would have gladly signed up. So I shouldn't have to be relegated to a building that's falling down anymore. Let this be my home building. But what if I could think of a college department, right? There's a science department there. So what does a high science school look like, where you got not just teachers, right? But professors and actual researchers are the people that's at that lab. And then what if you also had the literature spot over here? Chris knows about Berkeley High in Berkeley, California. They offer classes for their students that count towards college, like Black literature. The Bible counts as literature. You can do so many different things at that school, but if I live on a different part of the town, I can't even do it. They told my mom, who tried to give me an interdistrict transfer to go there, like my mother had been to jail before. They told her if she got caught using the wrong address, she would go to jail. Mm. How does that happen? And that was in the 90s, right? But in 2021, right? In 2020, whatever year it is, I don't know what even time is right now. But how are we not thinking in a way where the only walls that stop us are the ones that we build for ourselves? So what if our charter schools, our private schools, our traditional schools actually came together and built a citywide plan for what that city wants to be known for? So sometimes sometimes there are green cities, right? There's cities that's look, we want to be to green technology what San Jose is to like Silicon Valley. You know what I mean? And what if we were able to actually build that stuff? So like I said, but you don't ever have time to dream. We don't ever get a chance to just stop and dream because it's so many attacks happening. But here's the other thing that has to happen first before you can even imagine. And Chris says this a lot. So Chris, you feel free to chime in. The time where you all got to put your head down and say, I'm just doing work, is done. It's done. They're coming for you. Before this show started, I'm helping lead a pack in Oakland. And in that pack, it was a picture of white teachers that's not from Oakland, right? That has a sign talking about, we coming for the colonizers, and they are attacking Black and brown parents.
Reform parents. Parents
Huh?
who are looking to, charter parents are parents that they see as colonizers because they support charter schools. Right.
And Chris, let me tell you how much worse it is.
Yeah.
A large chunk of those parents don't even have kids just in charters. They have kids in traditional schools and charter schools. And I know this because I go speak at conferences and I say, all the educators raise your hand, and everybody raise their hand because they about to get love, right? And then I say, okay, where my charter teachers at? And then you could hear a penny drop. The penny wasn't dropping when you was cashing that check. It wasn't dropping when the traditional school kicked you out their system and the charter system picked you up. That's part of the reason that there's so many charter Black teachers, because that traditional system pushed you out.
The point that you're making needs to be like hammered on though, about like you just said, all the different types of schools coming together in the city. You know, the private schools, the charter schools, the district schools, traditional schools. What if they all came together? That's a good what if, and there have been compacts around the country, but that's a good time to look at places like Indianapolis, where the mayor took on the cause of making that happen, because the mayor is over all children in his or her jurisdiction. And what we do too often is allow them to play us against each other and not be responsible for every child in the city. And I want to know what authorizers and everybody else are doing to push elected officials and locales to be for everybody in their city, to make sure that every child, regardless of what kind of school you're walking into, this is why we got to take learning out of schools, because the private school parents deserve a mayor. Charter school parents deserve a mayor. District schools deserve a mayor. And shaming them to the table and making them be responsible for everybody, I think is a good way to go. Indianapolis, I have seen them do good things with charters, district compacts and agreements. It's not perfect, never will be, but it is a model for what other cities should look at least attempting to do.
Reef, get on in here, man. Let's get some of that Baba energy.
And real quick, I just got pinged. We got about 8 minutes left in this segment, okay?
Man, this is going by too fast.
I responded to the ping, Charles.
It's all, brother, I just got the message, brother.
Reef, Baba energy.
Yeah, I don't know about Baba energy, but I would say I totally agree. Like, you know, if the first questions we have to ask the political class, the policymakers, is where do your children attend? And what are you going to do for all children, right? Like, those are the first two questions, because too often, you know, folks are, you know, avoiding answering that question, or they, you know, respond to it in half truths. You know, in Philly and Pennsylvania, they'll say my kid goes to the public school, but when you peel that back a little bit, you know, they go to the most private of the public schools. You know, the public schools that are so private that they're more restrictive than actual private schools. You know, as far as like who gets in there, and you find out like that's where their kids go, right? And so what we have to have are, you know, these real questions, right? And they're not often asked. That should be one of the questions that's asked at any political forum when these, you know, these hypocritical politicians are talking about, no, we're going to close the gate for, you know, those families, but open the gate for families like, you know, like theirs. And so that's, you know, that's, I think, a really important aspect of it. And then secondly, you know, the Panthers used to always say the power is with the people, right? Power to the people. When you actually look at, and not just, I think too often charters and charter authorizers and reform spaces, they often only engage folks who are actually in the schools. My push would be, the actual folks that you should be engaging are folks who are on the waiting list. Like, yes, talk to the folks and serve the folks who are in there, but really have deep conversations with folks who are on wait lists, folks who've been rejected because there's not enough space, folks who had to find another option because, you know, there's a cap, right? And so that's why, and that should be proactive, not just when you want to have your charter, a new charter, You know, not just when you up for your 5-year renewal. This should be an ongoing, daily, grassroots conversation, support, organizing, right? Like that's what should be happening. It should be organizing every single day, not just t-shirts and pizza and chicken wings when you need somebody to show up to meetings. That's the difference.
Nothing wrong with chicken wings. Nothing wrong with
I'll
chicken
take
wings.
some pizza. I'll take some pizza too. It's just,
All right,
But that ain't enough. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, feed the people. Absolutely.
Yes, that's
like,
right.
you know, we come from traditions. You should never have guests and you're not feeding people.
That's
right.
right.
Like that's part of that is part of service. Right. And that's not enough. And don't do that every 5 years either.
All right, so here's the deal, right? Because I
Okay.
know that you guys get long-winded, so I want to set this close up.
Here we go.
Real nice, right?
TFA.
All right. So if you had 60 seconds, I need you to listen here.
Are you
because I know a
timing
lot
us
of
now,
people
too?
don't really
You
do
timing us?
auditory directions, right?
This is
And so I'm
terrible
giving
teaching.
you auditory
I hate
directions.
this class.
Oh boy. We're about to put a stopwatch on the screen.
So if you-
We're gonna do it
If
like the
you
kids
had-
do.
Oh my God. If you had 60 seconds alone with a charter school team looking to
Yeah.
pitch their ideas to open a school,
Yeah.
what would you say to them? 60 seconds here.
Wow. That's culturally
Brief.
insensitive.
I know you're not going to adhere to 60 seconds. We only got 5 minutes left. So go ahead and take your minute and 20. Go ahead.
That's right. That's
Wow.
right. Listen, if you're starting a school, first thing I would ask is you reflect and find out your why. You know, why are you starting that school? Are you really looking to ensure that that liberatory education is happening, that that revolutionary teaching and learning is happening in the school? What is your why? Why are you doing that? And if you can answer your why without looking at the historical experiences of children, the historical experience of Black teachers and Black leaders in this space, then your why is going to be askew because it's going to be misaligned with the history, the historical sense of urgency that the children, and most of the children are, you know, in a lot of these spaces are students of color. If there's a misalignment with your understanding of their needs and their needs, then it's going to be a miss. So my first thing would be, what's your why and how are you learning? What have you learned about the communities you say you want to serve? You know, because a lot of people come up with these 50 pages of their new charter, but they've not had a single, you know, meeting in a church, in the park, with families and conversations. They're doing not drive-bys and knocking on doors and asking people to sign up, but they haven't had listening tours. Right. And so that's what I would say. Like, how are you listening? How are you learning? And how are you reflecting and conveying your why to the community? And most importantly, what is their why? And how is that informing your application?
Charzy, because I know you stick to the rules.
It's all good. Start with data. But then I would say, like, not just with data, start with the end users of education, which is the students and their families. Talk to those people. What do they need? What are their hopes and dreams for their kids? And then use that data and research that you've done if you're actually doing your due diligence. And then I would say go out one more level. And what does that city need or what is needed in that area? Like what's lacking, what's missing? Again, living in the Bay Area, I saw what Silicon Valley has done. I saw, you know, when Van Jones was working on it, like that green tech stuff was doing, right? And so I think you should start there. And I think that, again, the walls and limits that we put up on ourselves, take that stuff away. But whoever you are and whatever this group is, I'm gonna say off top, you can't be no punk. You can't be no punk. Because as soon as you start doing the good work, they're gonna come for you. And if you're trying to like be sorry and scary and you're not willing to stand up with your kids and families, the way that those kids and families gotta stand up for themselves, then you probably shouldn't be out front. You know what I mean? It is a war. It should not be, but it is a war to educate our babies. It is a war to have quality. It is a war to have standards of what education sounds like. And don't all that sound crazy, right? But you know what sounds even crazier? When I see charter leaders get scared and put their head back in the sand because they scared of a confrontation. So you either gonna be with them people and be about what you say, or this just ain't the role for you.
Breezy.
I love the opportunity to talk to this group, so I'm happy for our invitation today and be with everybody. I hate the way that you set this up, Ray. I don't like your school, bro. Like the way that you set this up was very like over-disciplined and disciplinary, whatever. Your low expectations that we won't do it in 60 seconds, whatever. So whatever, it's fine. It's fine.
And then
application denied.
And then he gave like instant favoritism for Sharif, right? He was like,
that's right. That's right. So your application for your school is denied, brother.
That was
Ankrum.
differentiated learning at its best. Great job, right? Differentiated learning. Great job.
Me and Chris.
Anyways, my point. That's right. I'm in detention, but here's my point that I will say about this. I sat on a committee a couple of times with the foundation that gives seed money to start schools. And I saw the pitches. It was like Shark Tank. They would come in, they would do like an hour, we would sit with them. And then when they would leave, we would debrief, and then there'd be notes. And at the end of it, we would have the notes from all of them. And then some decisions would be made. This is what I saw. I saw a bunch of people come in with a bunch of kind of like, wild ideas that how they were going to do it differently, do something different. We're going to have school on the riverboat. We're going to have school in a treehouse. We're gonna have school on roller skates. We're gonna have school, like, it was just like, we're gonna have a school that is completely gonna use Kool-Aid as a way to understand chemistry, right? Like it was like all these really wild ideas. And somewhere the educators on our committee would always get back to, but how are you gonna make sure the kids are learning? And that would be the one thing a lot of them couldn't answer in their pitch. It was like, they were so wrapped up in the dazzle of the design of what they were doing. And on the flip side, we also had people come in and said, well, we're going to teach from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then we are going to test from 10 a.m. to 10 at night, right? Like, so they were on the other side of things. Like, it was going to be all learning on the side. I would say to people doing the pitches, you need to be able to figure out a way to balance the two, the design of the school and all that stuff and why it's compelling. You also need to answer one question for me that's very important. How are you going to establish roots? How are you going to make sure that the people in the community where you are trying to establish a school will have your back, will see the roots, will do what they need to do to make your school solid? That includes parents, community members, guardians, all of them. Anyways, I don't know what my time was like. I see you smiling.
Your time was like, it was like 1 minute and 25 seconds. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is we closed up nice. We closed up nice, right? You guys are looking beautiful on camera, right? So I'm gonna give a quick 30 seconds. Look, bro, you can't just take a compliment. Like, damn. All right. So if I'm in that elevator, I'm telling folks to engage parents and to meet them where they are. And so what I mean by that is a lot of times when we think about, if people are parenting well, we look at it through this white middle-class lens. And you can't do that with the 8 million Black families, and you can't do that with the 10 million Latinx families. We have to meet folks where they are. And not everybody's gonna look crisp in the way that white middle-class people present themselves. That doesn't mean that they're not gonna work hard for their kids. That doesn't mean that they don't love their kids. That doesn't mean that they don't want their kids to learn, because they do. And so we definitely need to take that into account when we talk about designing these schools. And that would be my pitch to them. All right, so we're up on time, and so now we're going to go to the Q&A.
Some of these kind of touched on in the answers, just FYI. So
okay, so are you handling the Q&A, Charles?
I guess I can handle that. That's fine. I think the people in the back are gonna help pitch. Like,
oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I only ask because, like, with this group, bro, I need a co-teacher because with Chris.
You need to lose your charter, is what you mean.
Let me just say, co-teaching is one of the most difficult things to do in a school. So I hope y'all did the planning.
All right. So question number one. Why do we think charter authorizers versus other players are effective change agents to lead and rethink the discussion?
Well, I'm sorry. So answer it one more time too.
Yeah. So why do we think charter authorizers versus other players are effective change agents to lead and rethink discussions?
Yeah, I think that's a good one for you and Sharif as school leaders.
Well, I mean, I would say one for a chart, like the traditional system, that's like they got a 200-year lease, right? Like they're not doing any reauthorize. Like for a lot of them, what they launched 100 years ago, that's what's cast in stone, and that's just how they're operating. I think the beauty of being a charter authorizer, you can actually, think deeply and critically about, like, okay, is this the right school? Will learning take place? Is there a level of accountability, right? Like, and so because you have to not only authorize, but reauthorize it, that is an accountability system, right? Like that, you can actually not only look at like the progress, look at what's been done, take into account like, hey, this, you know, this child was, you know, 6th grade levels behind. This community was oppressed for 4 generations of families, right? And have all of that context, and then make decisions, but also give the technical support if you want. I see some authorizers who don't do that and they step back, but as you said, Ray, like that should be, you know, a partnership, an ongoing partnership in between the authorization that's helping to inform, you know, what happens on a day-to-day basis, you know, with students. And I think the ability to give feedback, I mean, that's one of the biggest problems in schools. But, you know, adults want kids to accept feedback, but adults don't want to accept the feedback. Right. And so you can create that kind of culture as an authorizer to say, hey, as part of this application process, you know, you're going to hear feedback. We want to receive it as well. And how will you respond to it? And that should be a fundamental part baked in.
Yeah. Hey, so real quick, when people talk about, you know, when people talk about charter schools and they're like, hey, well, you know, charter schools, they don't answer to anybody. They don't do this and they don't do that. Well, that's kind of a lie, because you answer to your authorizer. And the quickest way for you to get your school shut down is by authorizer coming in and finding you out of compliance with not doing the things that you need to do in order to facilitate learning. And that just doesn't happen in district schools. And so, you know, it's rare that you go in and you're like, hey, this elementary school in a public school district is going to be shut down. No, they get generations. They get to tinker with generations of lives and fail folks for generations before, you know, someone comes in and is bold enough to say, you know what, that's it. We're shutting the school down. It doesn't work for people, right? And then you'll still have people that are aligned with that school that will fight tooth and nail to keep that school open, even though like it has failed generations. So I just don't get it. But I love the work that charter authorizers are doing, and be bold. Chris, jump in.
No, I just wanted to say real quickly on that. I think authorizers have been in love with their invisibility too. I think like while many of us have been fighting these fights for years and years and years out on the front line, I think authorizers have been in a real kind of Tony position to be behind the scenes and vacant from the fight and the real battle, not showing up. No, maybe we shouldn't comment on that. Maybe we shouldn't say anything about this or that or the other. Maybe we shouldn't get involved in the advocacy. They've been a little bit too in love with their invisibility, and that chicken. What comes home to roost? Does a chicken come home to roost, or does a rooster come home to roost? Chickens do come home to roost. Yeah, so that chicken is coming home to roost. You know? Yeah, that charter invisibility is coming home to roost, in that the public is largely ignorant about what charters or what authorizers do and how much accountability they have for the schools. And I will say a second thing. Minnesota, we have a Native American school, and that came out of the community. Another state, who I won't mention, couldn't get a Native American school through the authorizer and authorizing process because their history curriculum wasn't American enough. Be like the first one. Be like Minnesota. Don't be like that second one. And that's an authorizing problem. So when you talk about what power do authorizers have to determine things like equity, they have the power to say you can't have this Native American school because your history curriculum isn't American enough, right? So,
well, Chris, I think you made a good point as we lead to the next question. I think you need to look at like kings and queens, right? There are wartime kings, and then there's peacetime kings, right? Are you a wartime, are you a wartime operator, or are you a peacetime operator? Because these is wartime, so decide. To lead to our next question, and I think it was a really good one, and it'll probably come right back to you. It was about, here it is. How do we, as an authorizer, attract applicants who are coming from a cultural or neighborhood need, like mentioned in Minnesota? So I'll open that, and Ray, you can take back over on the timepiece. But that was one that got asked, and I think a few people really wanted to hear our thoughts on it.
So Charles, this is a perfect time when you should have let me ask the question, because it says Charles Cole would like to answer the question live, but yet you gotta
No, it's not Charles wanted to answer. I'm just letting them know that we as a team are answering it live. That's all.
First coach
technology, brother. It's technology. Because I don't necessarily need to answer. It's not for me to answer, brother. It's just I'm communicating with people back here, brother. So thank you, Ray, for pulling the curtain back. So the question, gentlemen.
Yeah.
But Chris, let's start with you though, because they said Minnesota specifically, and I know you got some thoughts on this.
Well, I would just say, first of all, I would throw the question to you guys in your respective areas, because I think in some places that question needs to be answered in places like California, and you're in California, Charles. Like, how do you make sure that there's more meaningful involvement of people directly from communities in the authorizing process? It's less of an issue in Minnesota, I think, possibly because it is easier for people in the community to create their own pitch, design it, and get to an authorizer. Authorizer A won't authorize you, authorizer B just might. So we have an authorizer here who I'm not going to name in Minnesota, who I think is better with things like out of school time, and better with starting schools for kids that are 3 and 4 and 5 years out of school or out of grade level, and they specialize in that. So if that's what you want to do. So one of the things is we have multiple authorizers in other places. The limited number of authorizers in some places isn't popular to say, especially to this audience, but the limited number of authorizers, I think in some places limits the number of avenues for community members to be able to get a school proposal through. We have multiple avenues. If you want to start an Afrocentric school, I can find you an authorizer in Minnesota to help you get that through. I don't know that I can do the same thing in California as easily. So I'd be interested to hear what you guys say about your local areas, about if I was in Oakland wanting to start a school that I knew was good for Black students, how could I make sure that those authorizers were paying more attention to our needs?
Yeah,
I think my bias just came out. My bias just came out because I wanted Charles to answer that question, because I'm really thoughtful about what should happen in Oakland. So I apologize, Charles.
I love you too, Raymond. So
someone should.
So first off, I'm gonna just be my authentic self. I think first we got to get rid of gang shit, and what I mean by that is it's like I'm pro charter, I'm anti charter, I'm pro this, I'm pro that. Like, I'm not pro none of that. I'm not pro charter, anti charter, pro district, whatever. Like, I don't care about none of it. I'm not in love with any institution. I'm in love with my people, and I think we got to start there. So I think what needs to happen in Oakland is getting recut up, and it's turning back into like gang times in Oakland, and it's really not helping anybody. And I think that you need the smartest people in that city. We got some really smart people on traditional side, charter side, but you know where else we got some smart people? Outside of education altogether. And I think that you got to start there. And again, I would look at what is our city in need of right now, okay? Because these people that I'm fighting in these unions, they taking pictures on the neighborhood that I grew up in that ain't got no Black people in it no more. Like, gentrification has wrecked my city. So what does my city need? And I would start with a community conversation around that. And I would go back to surrounding areas, Berkeley, Stockton, Antioch, all these, not Berkeley, because ain't no Black people who've been able to move to Berkeley either, but like these places, and I would try to re-emerge them, and like, what would it take to get you back in this city? What would it take to bring you here? And so my brother, for instance, bought a house in Richmond, but we grew up in North Oakland. He drives his kids to the charter school in our neighborhood because he wants his kids to be a part of the place where he no longer lives. So that's what I would do to start. I would have the courage to actually step across these lines and make a standard that's high regardless of where you are. And you got to stand in that, right? But you also have to build a community around you that's going to protect you, that's going to be there to serve you and be there to help you. So, and that's why we named ourselves the 8 Black Hands, right? Like, you need some people that will be ready to throw hands with you. And what I'm saying to the people that's listening here, I know it's a bunch of people listening. Will you join us and be part of those hands? And what that looks like is when my Black and brown parents who got kids everywhere start getting attacked by union entities that are white and calling them colonizers, I need this whole group to show up, right? What does that look like? You know what I mean? Or there's people that blame and say billionaires are making choices for our families. Billionaires don't care about us. Billionaires ain't calling and talking to Miss May down the street, right? You know what I'm saying? So we just got to kill those narratives. So I would start there, Chris, and Ray and Sharif. That's what Oakland needs. Oakland is the land of the Panthers, right? Like, Huey Newton he said, look, I went to the same school that Huey Newton went to, and he said in his book that's been translated into 30 languages, the first thing he said was, I ain't basically sending my kids to no OUSD schools, and you shouldn't either. You know, they're not teaching us. So I would go back to there.
All right, so Reef, real quick, we spoke about student outcomes and student learning. How are we thinking about those outcomes, and what student outcomes, what should they be looking like at a high quality school?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of times the easiest thing to say is and do is give some bubble sheets and say like, hey, you know, can they respond to the question? That's a part of it, but that's not the only thing that we should be thinking about. I think every school should have student and family surveys, you know, even community surveys. Like, you know, what is your experience as a child in this school, right? And that should be tied into the accountability system. Families, you know, how long do they stay? Do they return the following year? That's an outcome, right? Because we know if there's a consistency in a good school, the student is going to make progress. If they have to bounce around the 5 schools, then we know that there's an issue in that district and as well as the schools that they were attending. So I think, you know, how students learn, what they're able to do. If you see that students, their own vision of themselves, one of the things I would like to see more outcomes is how does schools protect and help students develop their positive racial identity, right? Like you can ask students about their you know, their own self-worth, right? And we talked about this before. You know, when Malcolm X asks his people, who taught you to hate yourself? Plenty of Black kids can say, my school did, my teacher did, my principal did. Right. And so those are all part of the outcomes that I would be looking for, and how we held ourselves accountable at the charter school that I was at for 11 years. Like, how are we doing with children? And we looked at student learning and student sense of belongingness as all part of the outcomes that we were shooting for.
Well, thank you for that. And so, unfortunately, our time is up.
Already?
We'll take some of these questions and turn them into a pod. So if you guys are following us on Sunday night, we'll definitely turn these questions into a podcast for you guys, and we'll rock it out like that. So Charles, close us out. Tell them where to follow us. Tell them where to find us. Whatever.
Yeah. So again, we're on all the socials, and take some time right now and tag us on Twitter. Like, let us show our families and the people listening to our podcast that there's a whole army of people behind them. So we're at 8 Black Hands 1, and please take time right now, send us a message and hashtag 8BH. We would really, really appreciate it.
You know what I will say at the end too,
yeah.
I think we should take some of these questions with us and have our host give us these questions, and we could do an 8 Black Hands Twitter chat and answer some of these questions. So folks, please join us, follow us, join us right now, tag us in, and then you'll be able to see our answers to some of these questions we didn't get to.
Yeah, that's what's up. So thank you guys for having us. Hopefully, you know, we were able to bring light to some things for you guys, and we were able to kick this off the right way. So you guys have high energy for the next 3 weeks. We appreciate the love. Peace.
Well, gentlemen, I never want to speak on behalf of anybody, but I will say on behalf of me and the millions of kids that need something better, thank you. Thank you for making me say amen a bunch of times. Thank you for making me laugh. Thank you for challenging me to think differently and for pushing us to think differently. There's so much great content we just heard. But the one thing that was really crystallized for me, that all of you touched on, but was kind of crystallized by 2 comments that Charles and Chris made. And that is, are we like for real willing to get in the fight, or are we going to continue to be comfortable in our own invisibility? That's real for us as a community to work through and think through, in addition to many of the other challenges that you all raised for us. So thank you. As my pastor would say, I'm all full up, and appreciate y'all very much for all that you're doing and for all that you continue to do for kids and families across this country. Again, appreciate y'all. Well, this is going to wrap up our first session. As folks know, we've got many additional sessions that are going to push and challenge, affirm, and help us do better in the work that we're doing in this evolution of charter schooling and authorizing. So encourage you to take advantage of the sessions happening this afternoon, and then again on Thursday as we engage this particular week, in particular on reflecting on where we've come and where we're at. Next week, thinking about how we need to evolve, and the week after that, how we need to innovate so that we can radically imagine a different kind of learning experience for kids and families. So with that, I think I'm going to wish us all adieu. Say thank you again to 8 Black Hands for the work that you're doing. Those of you that are still here, we do have a survey that we would appreciate y'all taking just a couple of minutes to answer so we can fulfill some of our responsibilities and get feedback so that we can get better. We'd appreciate that. And we will see you next time. Thank you again, gentlemen.